Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Communication Studies Alumni Panel. We are so excited to have four amazing Mount SAC alumni here to share their experience after receiving their Communication AAT degree. The panel will be split into two sections. So we'll start by asking our panelists a series of questions and end with a question and answer session where you can ask the panelists any questions that you might have about their experiences at Mount SAC, their experiences after leaving Mount SAC, anything that might have come up during the panel, you can go ahead and ask them, and you'll be using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screens to ask our panelists questions. And like I said, we have a really all-star panel of alumni. They're all like very impressive, and I had to condense all their bios because they have so many like amazing accomplishments and things that they are doing, have done, and are planning to do. So I am just going to kind of introduce them and their academic journey, but they'll probably go into more of like their personal journey and or like, personal academic journey and share a little bit more about that. So our first speaker is going to be Lizeth. She transferred from Mount SAC and was part of the forensics team, where she says she found her passion for communication and advocacy. Lizeth is currently in her last quarter at UCLA and is graduating in a couple of weeks. So thank you, Lizeth, for joining us on our panel. Our next speaker is going to be Jendi. Jendi is a 3L JD candidate at the George Washington University Law School, where she's studying to be a trial lawyer. She got her AAT in Communication Studies at Mount SAC in 2015, and then transferred to UCLA, where she graduated with a BA in English and an MA in African American Studies. All right, so yay, let's give it up for Jendi. Thank you, Jendi, for joining us. Our next speaker is Serena. Serena also graduated with her bachelor's from UCLA before getting her master's at Cal State Northridge. Serena is currently an instructor of communication studies at Mount SAC, Irvine Valley College, Cal State Northridge, and Harvard Westlake School. Thank you so much, Serena, for joining us. And last but not least, our final panelist is Jacqueline Yu. Jacqueline received her AAT from Mount SAC in Communication Studies as well. She then received her BA in Media Studies from UC Berkeley and Master's in Human Communication from Cal State Fullerton. She is currently the Director of Individual Events and a Communication Professor at Pasadena City College. Thank you so much, Jacqueline, also for joining us here today. So this is our all-star cast of panelists. I'm actually, before we move forward, I'll introduce myself. I'm Alex Lopez. I'm one of the forensics coaches at Mount San Antonio College and a communication professor, and I will be hosting the event today. And my co-host is Jedi Curva, who is also a communication professor and forensics coach. And so I will pass it over to him to facilitate the panel and ask our panelists their first question.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Alex. And again, I want to echo what Alex said. Thank you so much, panelists, for being here today and attendees. I'm looking forward for a informative and productive conversation that we're about to have. So we prepared a list of questions for the panelists and attendees. Should your question not be asked, please don't hesitate and put it in the Q&A box in the bottom of the screen. All right, so for the panelists, your first question is, how did you become a comm studies major?
And we'll go to our first panelist, Lizeth.
If you want. We're gonna do it in that order? Cool. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. Sure, thank you. So actually, before I became a comm major, I was actually a psychology major, which I think are very, very similar, like communication psychology. There's a lot of overlap, which I found really interesting. But where I really found like my emphasis in comm was because of forensics, which is speech and debate at Mount SAC. And I like realized like, oh, I kind of like this a little bit more than psychology, even though I love psych as well. Comm just seemed like the perfect fit, especially for what I want to go into in the future, which is like public policy. So that's how I found myself in the communications major. I'll pass it over to the second speaker.
All right, and you're up.
Hey everyone. So coming into Mount SAC from high school, I already had an interest like in the communication world. I had a little bit of a theater background, a little bit of doing like the school news background when I was in high school. So I knew communication, journalism, that realm was already of interest, but it was when I took both public speaking honors with Professors Kenny Clawwitter and Professor Liesel Reinhardt. Amazing class. It was so much fun. And then I also had the opportunity to take interpersonal communication that same summer with, he passed away some years ago, but the late, great Philip Maynard, who is a legend in the forensics community. And it was just that moment that I knew like, wow, like I enjoy this and I want to keep taking more of these classes. And that then kind of parlayed me getting involved in the forensics team. And I can talk about that later, but it really just started with those two classes.
Thank you, Jendi. Serena?
I think for me, when I came into Mount SAC, I had no idea what I wanted to do. And so I was bouncing between majors. I think I came in as a marketing major. I looked into sociology, English, linguistics. So I was kind of all over the place. And I think generally when you don't know which career you want to pursue, which is totally fine, the second best bet is just to go with the classes that you enjoy the most. And I think that's the safe route to go, because realistically, you don't know. You might not always know what you want to pursue. And so for me, the classes that I felt had the most impact on me, the classes where I felt like I grew the most, learned the most, enjoyed the most was comms. And so I decided to get my major in comms, and I don't regret it.
Thank you, Serena. All right, Jacqueline.
Yeah, I think my experience really resonates with what everyone else was saying. I had a very non-traditional path to higher education. So I was 16 when I started at Mount SAC, and I had no idea what I wanted to do. I was a fetus, and I just wanted to explore everything. I started off as an interior design major. Then I somehow jumped to theater, journalism, criminology for a little bit. And I actually found communication studies through joining the forensics team. Like Jendi, I took a class with an amazing speech professor, Danny Cantrell, who still teaches there. And he also happened to be a director on the team. So he recruited me. And I remember joining it being like, oh, it's not about dead bodies. Okay. And realizing this whole world of communication and advocacy and speaking up for yourself and finding your voice. And I realized that was so tied to the classes in communication studies that it made me so excited to want to learn more. And I remember taking intercultural, interpersonal, and really finally figuring out who I was as a person. And that's why I was like, if I was able to find my voice in this, I can't even imagine what my future would hold if I continue in communication studies. And it led me to where I am today. And I'll be talking more about that. So I'm very thankful that I found the major.
All right. Wonderful.
Nice. It sounds like most of you kind of got into communication from a professor that like led you in, and kind of the classes that you took. And I know some of you mentioned some of the other classes like interpersonal and intercultural. What were maybe some of, and this is kind of just a general question to all of you, is what were some of the standout, or was there any like standout moment from any of those like extra classes beyond just Speech 1A that that stands out to you or that you remember in particular?
I know for me, I can think back to an activity that Professor Maynard had us do in interpersonal communication. And long story short, he would always have us out of our comfort zone emotionally. So that's actually what made the class, I think, even more challenging for many, myself included, because he just forced you to really be honest with yourself. And to go back to Jackie's point about like Jacqueline's point about knowing who you are. And so anyhow, we had this like circular activity, and it was like this magic mirror exercise, and everybody passed the mirror and you had to tell the entire class what you saw in the mirror. And I mean, we had everybody breaking down, people, you know, just sharing insecurities or sharing that they see doubt or they see fear. And that to me is what I always think about, because I think in that moment, it was a very like pivotal shift in how I saw myself in higher education, particularly with being a first generation college student. I'm also Sierra Leonean American, the daughter of immigrants, blah, 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 blah. So being the first in my family to really navigate all of this, I had a lot of pressure on me, a lot of doubt, a lot of anxiety. And one thing Professor Maynard told me after every single class, he would be like, I need you to look into joining the forensics team. And I'd be like, please, I'm not doing that. Ain't nobody got time for that. I'm just trying to transfer and get out of here. And finally, at the end of, I think it was the last day, I think he walked me over when they were having the audition. And that's when I got to meet the other coaches like Danny, who's amazing as well. And Jeff, who's no longer here, but he just kept pushing me. And he finally told me, he said, I hope you one day see it, but I am able to see what you haven't seen in yourself. And it was just like, wow. That to me is what I always think back on with these classes. Like, I don't even think about the grade or the assignments. Like, I really think back on those pivotal moments. I mean, I was basically like 18, 19 at the time, and now I'm almost 30. So it's like, that stuff stays with you for a really long time.
That's amazing. Yeah, it's like, it's so funny. It's exactly what you said. It's not like the actual kind of material, but it's so much more of like, what is the underlying meaning that you got from it? That's awesome.
Yeah, I agree. And I think for me, that's one of the lasting impacts that, especially with folks who go through forensics, where we don't leave knowing necessarily what to say or how to say them, right? But why to communicate at all. And I think that question is so sustainable, and it informs it's one of the reasons why I became, a communication studies professor today. It's amazing. Next question. What was your experience like as a communication studies major at Mount SAC? Lizette?
Overall, I feel like it was just really positive. As like my peers have mentioned, all the professors are just like amazing at Mount SAC. And I feel like, sorry if you could hear my roommate, she's also in another meeting. But I always felt like very included in every like conversation that we would have, or it was just a very like open space. So especially because like, at Mount SAC, like, or like a community college in general, like the classes are a lot smaller. So you could really get to know like your professor more, your peers more, especially with such a long time. And with like the 16, 18 weeks, it's very nice. And it's quite different compared to like my experience here at UCLA. But overall, I really enjoyed like every single class. And I feel like in every single class, I ended up coming out with like learning something new, which is important, obviously. And great memories with communications at Mount SAC.
That's good. I like that. Jen D?
Sorry, can you repeat the question as far as like my experiences?
Yeah, so like your overall experience as a comm major at Mount SAC.
I mean, I got a lot out of it. I mean, from doing forensics, which was just a whole journey in itself. And for me, what I always look back on is just being able to be at like the front lines of like issues and causes that you're passionate about. I mean, I remember working with Roger at the time on my speech about violence against Black trans women, and nobody was really ever talking about that. And now that's like, a thing. And so that's one thing I've always appreciated about the forensics community is just there's so much emphasis on your research, on the writing, and getting at like ahead of issues before they're even like, on the media per se. So looking back on it, one thing that sticks out to me from the forensics piece was when I was able to compete for one tournament, and I think I got like Southern California's most persuasive speaker and got to go to Interstate Oratorical, which is a tournament in DC. And I was just kind of like glad to be there because this is the best of the best from everybody in the country. And just being able to share that speech about violence against Black trans women. And I think this was actually right before the cuff of like, really more of the atrocities that were happening with BLM and all of that stuff. But that's something that I always think back on. And I just have a lot of pride with that because that was like my baby to write a speech about that and get up in front of people and tell people about these issues. And then after competing, I also even worked on campus. I worked in the Speech and Sign Success Center. I also was a writing center tutor. So to me, I was like, okay, communication at every level, working with my peers, working with my other classmates, and getting people excited about sharing their voice. Like, public speaking is not this scary class. Like, I encourage you to take it. It's fun. And I think for me, it just set me up just to have such a very enriching experience when I did transfer. And now being in law school and almost done, thank goodness, I'll be done next year. It's like, there's so much that I always think back to that I got from forensics. I mean, when I was competing, we call it moot court board, but it's kind of like our version of competitive speaking, where you're talking to a judge and defending your points. It's kind of like debate. I think back to things I was taught in forensics, like about, being confident, making sure your suit is not wrinkly, being kind to the other competitors, like stuff like that, that actually is really important in the legal field. Like, you don't want to come across as someone who is just this like evil person and disrespectful. But I was groomed at such a young age to like value those skill sets. And it's definitely something that I carry with me even when I don't realize. So, I mean, to answer that question, I mean, my experience as a comm major was just so thorough, and I'm just truly blessed that I had a lot of those opportunities now, being like at the tail end of my educational career and, pursuing my career as an attorney.
Wonderful. Considering that we do all have that common shared, forensics in this panel, like, how I want to add a layer to this question of like, what was your experience as a comm major, or how would it have been different at Mount SAC if you didn't do forensics, right? And so Lizette and Jendi, if you want to like do a redemption answer in this too, but yeah, I'll put it over to Serena.
Yeah, I guess to answer the first part of the question about my comms experience, I think if I'll first focus on the classes itself, I definitely had a lot of really great teachers, and in every single class, I saw so much growth. I took public speaking with Roger, I took debate with Danny, and those two classes really helped me, find my voice, become a more confident speaker. I was the kind of speaker who would be constantly shaking. I mean, I still shake, but not as much as before. And so the comms professors at Mount SAC are honestly incredible. They all care so deeply about the students and their teaching quality. And that's not something you find in every single institution. I can't speak for like Jendi and Lizette, who also went to UCLA, but I honestly can confidently say that I found some of my Mount SAC professors like way better than my UCLA professors, like way better. And so the quality of education, just because it's at a community college, does not mean it's any less, right? The classes you take at Mount SAC, just because it's a community college, does not make it less value than one at like a prestigious university. If anything, I would say that the education that you can get at Mount SAC is just as good, if not, significantly better than one at UCLA. But to answer Jedi's question about forensics, I think the speech and debate community, or just being a part of that community, really enriches your experience as a comms major. If you're someone who's interested in learning about interpersonal communication, right, intercultural debate, whatever it is in the realm of communications, I feel like forensics does enrich that, because you can take everything you learned in the class and then basically like put it into practice right then and there. If I weren't a part of the speech and debate community, I just feel like I would have kind of missed out on so much more. Yeah. And I just say that because I think that, the professors here, I think it has to do with the professors, honestly, at Mount SAC too, because the professors, like all of us echo the same thing. We have such incredible professors who care so deeply, and these are the same professors who coach the team. So it's not about competing necessarily and learning to find your voice. Like, that is a big part of the community, but also being in such close proximity with professors who care about you, want to invest in you, want you to grow, want you to become a better person. I feel like you just come out of your community college experience having learned so much more as not just a scholar, but as an individual as well.
Yeah.
That's all I will say.
Yeah. Like I can relate to that. When I finished my undergraduate at Eastern Michigan, I often told people that a lot of my knowledge about comm studies came from forensics, right? And I think what it is that we do learn the concepts and the lessons as comm majors in those courses, but forensics take it into overdrive where these are the global applications, right, of these like concepts, like Jendi talked about, competing in IOA and being able to take that topic on a much bigger platform, and being able to be, received by a wide, like audience members, then it just makes communication studies as a discipline that much more tangible.
Helps
Yeah.
you make it more practical too, so you can see it in a more applicable way.
I really like, Serena, when it was like you put it really simply, where it's like, I just feel like I would have been missing out if I didn't do forensics. And I think that's like the feeling that a lot of people have when they leave, where it's like, I couldn't imagine not having done this activity. And you kind of don't really know what it is until you do it, which is kind of the crazy part, where it's like, you just have to experience it to know. But I think that is a really great point, where it's like, it's just such a big part of also communication studies too, that like Jedi said, it augments the experience. And for any of you in here who don't know, forensics is just another way of saying speech and debate. So if you've heard anything about like the forensics / speech and debate team, anytime forensics is used, it's basically interchangeable for speech and debate.
I just wanted to also quickly add, like, Serena, you made me think of this. I think for me, it made me a better student, and it's so rigorous when you are on the forensics team. And when I was younger, I played basketball, so I knew what it was like to be on a team and to compete at a high level. And I also remember during my generation at Mount SAC, it truly is like playing a sport with the amount of time that it takes to you're traveling, you're putting all this work in. If you're not sleeping, you are memorizing a speech, you are doing something, like having conversations about your topic or whatever. So once I transferred, I think for me, I really saw just how mature I was as a student. And I think at the university level, professors can pick up on that, whether you did forensics or not. Just going to a community college first, like, it just gives you a whole different set of experiences that people coming straight out of high school into the university don't have. So I was really appreciative of that. And actually, at the end of my time at Mount SAC, I won the Student of Distinction Award, and I won in the competitive category. And typically that goes to like an athlete, but it's like, no, I do speech and debate, and this is very competitive, and it's a lot of work that went into this. So I was glad that like people could see in the Mount SAC community, like, we don't just get up there and like talk. Like, this is a very rigorous activity. And as everyone has mentioned, it just parlays into every single facet. It doesn't matter what you do. Like, literally forensics is why like I'm able to like kick it in overdrive as a researcher in law school.
Wonderful. All right. And Jacqueline?
I think everyone covered such wonderful points. I want to first answer Jedi's question about what would communication studies or Mount SAC would have been like without forensics. And honestly, just when I really, really kept thinking about it, I don't think I would have got a full ride to UC Berkeley if I didn't do forensics, because forensics is really a place that taught me, like what everyone's saying, how to grow up. It gave me so many nuanced experiences that I was able to talk about in my transfer application that I would not have had if I wasn't involved in a community on campus. And that kind of relates to my experience overall in comm studies at Mount SAC. Is in a community college like Mount SAC or any community college, oftentimes students see it as a commuter school, and you don't really spend a lot of time on campus. And because of that, people end up not actually building experiences, building competitive resumes and applications for transfer or for job opportunities. And so forensics was one of them that really kind of forced me on campus to practice, to be with other people, to get involved in our department, to a point where I was a strong applicant, because honestly, before that, I wasn't sure if I was. But not just that, it really inspired me to build community in general at Mount SAC. I ended up becoming the Phi Theta Kappa president. I ended up getting involved in multiple clubs on campus, doing projects with the president, and just also getting involved in my community in Walnut. And that was all because I saw the potential community had from forensics. And so I was really thankful for that experience because it really taught me the good lessons that I needed going into Berkeley. Because at Berkeley, instead of being a transfer student that kind of shied away and just was like, I have 2 years here, I'm just going to get it done and graduate, I was like, no, I have 2 years here. I want to make the most of it and build every community possible that I can, because I saw how much forensics made a community for me in the 2-year program. So when I went to the 4-year program, I was, more outgoing than I used to be. I was seeking out community. I was getting involved in clubs. At some point, I was probably in like 12 clubs on campus, and it was a lot, but I was so thankful because I think it's so important to make the most of where you are. And as Jendi mentioned as well, as a first generation college student, that's something that is not really taught and ingrained in you sometimes, because just like, go get your degree, you did it, right? But it's also like, I want to get my degree, but I also want to either leave a legacy or be so involved to a point where when I leave, I feel like, okay, I did that. Like I got involved, and I made a point to be proud of myself, regardless of how little or how much that I put in. And that was something that forensics really taught me, because I had to grow up so much in that community, and you spend so much time with that team. Serena was actually one of my teammates. And so you, like, even everyone in this room, like we all know each other. We all still keep in touch. And like, that's crazy to say so many years later about community college friends, but that's because forensics built such a strong support system in all of us that it just felt ingrained in us to always like have a special connection with everyone that was a part of that community. And so I'm just so thankful for that forensic experience, but also so thankful for the department at Mount SAC. If it wasn't for those instructors, like so many of us mentioned, I wouldn't have found forensics. I wouldn't have gotten involved. I wouldn't have been nominated for student of distinction and won competitive, right? Like Jendi was saying, like that came from our speech instructors that nominated us because they saw potential in us. And I really don't think any of us in this room, people who are facilitating as co-hosts and also us as panelists, would be where we are today if it wasn't for the people, a part of the communication studies community, believing in us when we didn't believe in ourselves. So I'm really thankful for that experience at Mount SAC.
And thank you, Jacqueline, for expanding education, right? The term education that can be found outside of the classroom, right? Not a replacement of, but to like color the experience more. And it's nice because, I mean, yeah, absent forensics, I just realized now, it's how do you imagine something that never happened, right? And it's so hard to like imagine that. And so like, yeah, thank you for entertaining that idea. Lizette?
Yes, thank you, Jedi. Everyone pretty much like said everything that I wanted to say in regards to forensics. I think what I'll add to it is it really is just like a family. And I feel like if I didn't do that, if I didn't do forensics, I wouldn't have had this like little core family that I have now. And it's funny because even when I talk to like my UCLA friends, it's like I told them like, oh, you just had to be there. Like you just won't get it when I talk about like forensics, because like even my best friend Val, like she's my roommate right now here, and I met her through forensics. And like a lot of my core friends now are from my forensics, like my time in forensics. And I just feel like I would have been missing a lot, and a lot of like my key memories that I have. Prior to joining the team, I had this mindset that, okay, I'm gonna go to Mount SAC and just like finish my stuff and get out. And that's what I would do. Like I joined like 2 clubs maybe, just because I was like, oh, this will look good when I'm trying to transfer. But I wasn't really like passionate about any of them. And I was like, I'm not trying to make any friends. I'm gonna get out of here anyway. So when I joined the forensics team, that's when I like really found my community. And ultimately what kind of made me decide to come here at UCLA, because I felt like that community would still be here. And yeah, like overall, like the transfer community is like really strong here. But similar to what Serena was saying, like back to in the earlier section, I do think that like the professors at Mount SAC are way better than like the ones at UCLA, just in the like connection aspect. Not that they're bad here, right? but there's just so many students that you just don't get to build that kind of relationship. Also, I mean, it's different being in forensics because we literally spend so much time together, but I think that's like an even better thing. Like you get to really know these amazing people and like educators. And I'm sure you could do that at your university by going to like office hours and stuff, but it's never the same. But yeah, that's it.
All right. Moving on to our next question. How did your communication AAT get you to the point you're at today?
I don't know. I'll go again then.
That's right.
Yeah. So I wouldn't have been able to come here if I didn't do my AAT in comm. But the funny thing is that when I actually transferred to UCLA, I was a linguistic psychology major, because this was before I decided that I wanted to do communications. And I was like, as I mentioned, I was a psych major before, so I got my AAT in both psych and comm. So I was like, oh, the perfect mix. It was not. Comm was the choice. So after I was able to get into communications, luckily. But ultimately, that my AAT of communications allowed me to really have a great platform for like my speaking skills. Obviously that is a big part of like forensics as well. But I think like educationally, it's really like allowed me to open a lot of doors for a lot of the things that I do even right now. So for example, I'm a tour guide on campus, and a lot of these skills that I learned at like in forensics and in like comm at Mount SAC are what I do every day, right? So yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, so I actually so UCLA was always like a top choice for me, but I was also like considering USC and Berkeley and I think one other school, but I always knew I didn't want to do communication at UCLA because I didn't like how they got down. Like once I kind of learned what communication studies meant at a university level, I wasn't down with that. So I was like, okay, we're gonna figure it out. If I go to USC, we're gonna do like communication, Annenberg School, journalism. If we go to UCLA, we're gonna do English. So I kind of created like a strategy for myself. And yeah, that's what I did. I had a really great honors counselor, Randy, who was amazing. And he made sure that no matter what classes I took, like I had all my options open, which I loved. So it kept me open for the Cal State system, the private school system, and they always kind of do their own thing because they want your money, and then the university public system. So going into UCLA, once I declared that I was an English major, I did have to take, I think, 1 or 2 lower division requirements in English at UCLA to officially declare it. But once I got through that, I was kind of like, okay, great. And I got to take a lot of courses that were heavily focused on literature and stuff like that. And I enjoyed it. I've always loved to write. Math and science never came easy for me. So even growing up, I remember like on the like state testing, like I had scored so low on math, like I got the highest in like language arts, like they called my mom in, like they were concerned what happened, but I just have always loved to write and read. And I think for the most part, I adjusted very well. I mean, everyone says, you know, like the transition from community college to the university is a lot of reading and writing. But I think coming from the background I did with comm studies at Mount SAC and the types of courses I had taken at Mount SAC did prepare me. And I was also kind of used to reading a lot anyways, because I think forensics kind of draws people who enjoy that, who enjoy reading public events and looking at news and diving deep into stuff. So like researching and stuff I really enjoyed. But, you know, I think for me, it just set me up to just, you know, move on to the next path. And I knew, you know, as a young person at Mount SAC that this wasn't like the last stop. So I always knew that I wanted to pursue higher education and even going into UCLA. I think I wrote it like in my like transfer, I think it was called TAP. I don't remember, but like in the essay I wrote, like, I'm gonna get a master's and a law degree. Like I already knew this when I was like 20 years old, it's happening. But to me, I think Mount SAC just laid that platform. And I think someone brought up earlier the quality of like teaching. I definitely noticed that. And I think the biggest thing is because at the university level, the faculty there are, they're trained researchers, like that's kind of like their priority. Not to say you won't get a professor who can do both. I definitely had unicorn professors who are great at their research, but also great at public speaking and can connect to people in a lecture. But it's not like the norm as you would find at Mount SAC. So I definitely missed that when I got to the university level, because like everyone said, you can definitely tell a difference in the quality of teaching, especially when someone isn't just having like their TA basically teach the class.
Just to comment on something you said or something that you mentioned, I think it's interesting to note that just because you get your AAT and COM doesn't mean you can't go into so many other arenas, right? Where because it is such a kind of like generalizable skill, you can go into law and politics and a lot of just different areas. So I'm really glad you touched on that, Jendi.
All right, Serena.
I think I'm going to answer the question more like, I kind of want to approach this with how it helped me in my journey as I try to figure out my career. Obviously, if you're going to ask me how my comms AAT helped me as a comms instructor, I feel like the answer is very clear. But when, previously I was talking about how I didn't know what I wanted to do after I transferred. And I think once I transferred to UCLA, I still didn't know what I wanted to do. And so I kind of bounced around. I checked out, administrative work. I went into the entertainment industry area. I even tried a little bit of like politics, nonprofit work. And I think that when it comes to your comms AAT degree, even though you're taking a diverse range of classes in the comms department, there's still like a core set of skills that you're learning and developing in every single class, right? These skills include like strong research skills, writing skills, being able to explain the work you're doing in a more eloquent way. There's just so many skills that you're learning in every single class that's applicable no matter what kind of career you're interested in. And I think it's, it goes to say, because we are all from various different, we're all pursuing different career paths. But for me, when I was transferring and as I was trying to navigate and figure out what kind of internship I wanted to do and what kind of career I wanted to go in, and as I was just trying everything out, no matter what I did, I felt like I did everything relatively well because I had this core set of skills that I learned from higher education, from my comms courses. So when I did nonprofit work and I tried to go into politics, right, my writing and speaking abilities really carried me well and helped me out there. When I went into the entertainment industry and public relations, I really had to know how to read, write, and speak, and those skills also transferred there. And so even though I was kind of all over the place in a good way, I felt like I still had my foundation set, and that really helped me out as I was just testing out the waters of like what I wanted to do and what I wanted to pursue.
I like that.
Thank you.
Yeah, like Serena, if I were to answer it from communication studies AAT to now being a professor of communication, the answer is very, very linear as to how it helped me get to that point, right? Because you kind of need that degree to be in this profession. But I did want to touch about like how I kind of changed paths, actually. I was communication studies at Mount SAC. And like Jendi, I was deciding between multiple schools. And I was originally going to go to a 4-year that was primarily for forensics. But I realized that I wasn't 100% certain at the time that that was the only path for me. And actually, my coaches at the time also said the same thing to me and was like, we think you can explore more and like you have so much potential. And so it came down to UCLA communication studies and UC Berkeley media studies. And I remember being really uncertain about Berkeley because I was like, I don't know if media studies is the right major for me because I have fallen in love with intercultural, interpersonal communication. I don't know if journalism is the route I want to go into. And so I remember going there, being a little uncertain, but realizing that I was actually so happy with that choice because personally for me, that diversity of education honestly really did help me. The communication studies was the strongest foundation. I remember being a really great student in media studies because of my background in communication studies. For example, when we talked about marketing, I understood the like almost psychology and communication psychology behind why people made choices and why people spoke the way that they spoke and what's attractive because of my public speaking interpersonal background. When it came to working in journalism and studying international relations, that intercultural background was so strong for me to understand why different cultures act the way they do and how we can be more competent in our intercultural communication to have good journalism, to have good international relations and marketing. And so I was really thankful for that because even though I was learning something different, it still came back to my education at Mount SAC. And that was so important for me. Because I was not sure. And I ended up dabbling, like Serena said as well, in the entertainment industry. I did entertainment reporting for a while and wanted to pursue a full-time career as a news reporter. And then I ended up getting a really amazing opportunity in San Francisco working for recruiting and sales, supporting Dropbox. And I was just like, I'm a little all over the place right now. Like I'm always going to give my 110% and be passionate for whatever I do. But I remember being uncertain as to what was my full future passion. But I realized that everything that I wanted to do, it all came down to me being able to use my voice and help others because of that communication lens that I always kept thinking through. And I remember working corporate in San Francisco and the bug came back. I was like, I want to go judge a forensics tournament. And Mount SAC actually had me come back with them to judge at nationals. And I remember being there and thinking like, what am I doing with my life? Like, I love communication. I love forensics. And I need to pursue that because that is like, there's no other job that I would want to wake up at 4 a.m. for besides forensics and besides communication. And that's when it really hit me. And I was like, that's what I should be doing. And I remember going back to my hotel room at the tournament being like, communication studies, master's programs. Like I was trying to find a degree and I was trying to go so quickly because it was summer. And I was like, I need to get it into a program by fall. And it was actually Mount SAC forensics and Mount SAC communication, plus a little bit of Berkeley, but really Mount SAC communication studies that got my foot in the door because all the programs I was applying to, they knew how strong the communication studies program was at Mount SAC and forensics as well. And that helps open up the door for me to get myself into my master's program and also get a full ride as well. And so I was so thankful for that. And I was so happy about that because in that program, I realized how much communication can expand. And I remember it was a communication studies master's and they were so uncertain about me because they were like, this girl went to Berkeley and did media studies. Like she's not a comm studies person. I was like, hold on. I remember everything from Mount SAC, probably more from Mount SAC than I did from Berkeley. And it was so wonderful because I pulled from that experience and grew it still through communication. And so I loved doing research like Jendi was saying. So I was really fortunate to do research on communication in conjunction as an Asian American woman, communication in conjunction with mental health and illness, communication in conjunction to academic pedagogy and being a better instructor for my students. And so that all stemmed from my communication AAT and what I was super passionate about. And I remember I was able to present at the National Communication Association conference. And I remember just talking about my community college experience and how my communication degree really led to where I am today because that forefront passion never left. And that passion was built at Mount SAC. And I would not have come back if it wasn't for that, what built at Mount SAC, because it was always in me. And I tried so hard to stuff it down and find a different career and do something different, explore my options. And it was just like, boo boo, we're still here. And that kind of is what led me back. And so I'm really thankful, because if it wasn't for my counselors and my instructors at Mount SAC that showed me that passion and showed me that potential, I would have never been full circle to come back and be a professor of communication and director in forensics. So I'm really excited.
One comment after hearing you all answer the question is that I'm relearning to appreciate how flexible this major can be, right? Like the ability of finding communication studies in other non-communication studies pockets, right? And insert ourselves and our beliefs and our practices. And that flexibility, once we do finally find where we want to settle, it's an informed choice. And I'm glad that is something that's, being communicated out there. Right, so moving on to our next question. What is the most underrated benefit? I don't know why I'm reading this like a CA research question. What's the most underrated benefit of being a communication studies major?
I'll go with Lizette first.
Yeah.
If you want to go ahead and answer that.
Well, thank you. I'm not really sure if there's like an underrated one. I think it's just like the one that comes to mind is like having great communication skills. Overall, you use your voice every day, right? And even when it comes to like interviews, just talking to people, it's funny because I find myself like judging my professors when they're speaking. I'm like, man, this guy should take a speech and debate class or something, or should take speech 1A. But yeah, I don't even think that's underrated though, because it really applies to like everything that you do. I'm trying to think of an underrated skill. I really am. I think maybe like the research aspect. There is a lot of research that goes into communication that you normally just don't think about, but you kind of learn to like know what exactly you have to be looking for, and like quickly. And that's something that I've been able to apply, especially like at my other institution now here at UCLA. When some of my peers, like, they're like, oh, we have to do this literature review. And I'm like, oh, it's like easy. Just look at this. And that's certainly a skill that I learned because of forensics. I could talk about forensics all day, but yeah.
I like that. I think I would say there's a few that come to mind. For sure, empathy and having a very broader perspective and worldview. I think sometimes those skill sets, or mainly attributes, I should say, can get overlooked, when we think about like the hard skills. But I think for me, I've always been an empathetic person, but coming out of this experience and what I went through at Mount SAC, the relationships I built, people I got to know through my classes, through the forensics team, what they've had to overcome, it just instills in you so much empathy. Like, you truly never know what people are going through. And that's something that I carried with me in the way that I present myself in front of other people and how I treat other people. Earlier, I said one thing, forensics, and I remember the coaches really being sticklers on just always being respectful in competitions, like to never ever be rude to judges or your other competitors, and just things like that. So for me, I think about empathy. It's bigger than forensics. It's bigger than the classroom, with just how we deal with people. And I don't want to, open up the rabbit hole and get into what happened this week because it makes me emotional. But just when we think about what's happening in our world, it is such a scary, difficult place. And the pandemic itself didn't help. For many people, it was a hard period to be going through whatever issues, plus this pandemic. And we see, issues with mental health continue to rise. So I really think empathy is something that we in the world need to do more of. And then lastly, with just the perspective part, even if I wasn't tasked with like the topic in forensics, like I still learn as just like a secondhand, as a friend or whatever. You just broaden your perspective about so many different things. Like, I mean, everybody in forensics is like, a little bit of everything at some point. It's like, I don't do poetry, but I know about this, or I did CA and I loved it. And like my friends like thought CA was like the boring event and all that. They didn't want to mess with it, but they were always fascinated with my topic. So it just really broadens like, you know, your depth of knowledge. And I think that's an underrated attribute as well. I mean, just being able to understand intimately like current events and how to really unpack information that is biased or information that is, you know, suspect. Like forensics teaches you a lot of that. And I'm so grateful because when I deal with people, I'm like, oh, you're crazy. Like, what are you talking about? Fox News, what's happening? But it's like, I think about just, you know, even now as an attorney, right? Like knowing the argument on the other side is critical, even if I don't agree with it. But I learned that just from doing like Parley and LD in forensics, which is just debate. And that's like, you know, key with being successful in law school is, you know, how do you present the arguments? How do you anticipate arguments, or how, you know, what is opposing counsel going to say and what's my response to it? I have weak evidence, but how can I frame this in a way that's most favorable to my client? So again, I always just think about those like skill sets I got from broadening my perspective. And it's not necessarily a hard skill, but it's just an attribute that I think can be underrated when you truly are well versed in your breadth of knowledge.
Thank you so much for pointing out the importance of like nonverbal communication, right? And how, in order for us to be effective communicators, we gotta listen first, right? And in forensics, we do often focus on what are you gonna say in that 10 minutes or in that 5-minute speech or in your debate. We talk less about like when you sit there and you listen to other people's speeches, what do you learn, right? So thank you for pointing out that in communication, that information can be, you know, shared via that way as well. So we're actually going to skip to the final question. And then audience, thank you. I see your questions. We have one more to go, and then we are going to go through all of your questions as best as we can. But to ask the last question, wait, I'm sorry. No, we're not done with this yet. No, sorry. The current question, we're going to keep going with Serena and Jacqueline. Sorry about that. Serena, go ahead.
Okay, underrated benefit. Yeah, quickly piggybacking off of what Jendi said, I love the idea of how, and you know, as a comm scholar, you get to see and apply a lot of your knowledge, and you know, you have a safe space to discuss just like current events that are happening. I feel like it does make you open-minded, and I feel like I just feel like everything she said, I was like, yes, I totally agree. From like empathy to being open-minded, there are so many personal traits that I feel like I was able to grow from my major. And I don't think that's something every single major, like, I don't think that's something everyone can say, right? Like sometimes your classes are more technical than others, if you will. But I think as a comms major, you really get to explore and grow as an individual in addition to being a scholar. But I think one of the more technical aspects I also wanted to bring up, in addition to all the amazing things that were said, is just the fact that you have so much room to explore. I think there's this saying where it's like, if you're like, people are like, what can you do with a comms major? And the answer is like literally anything. You know, we have like a future lawyer, attorney, future senator, Lizette, maybe, I don't know. I'm not sure what you want to get into, but it's just like, no matter what you want to pursue, the skills are transferable and you have so much room to grow and explore. So I think a lot of people often put down comm scholars because it's so broad, but I think that that is actually its underrated benefit. It's so broad that you can really go into anything. Heck, if I wanted to be a doctor as a comms major, I really think I could have gotten there. You know, I really think I could have gone into med school. So I think that's one of the most underrated benefits, where if you are someone who, you know, you don't know what career path you want to pursue, or if you are someone who is interested in everything and you want to explore everything and see what is calling to you, you have the space to do that. And because you have such a good foundation from your classes, the skills are transferable and you can really pursue anything that you're interested in. And I think having that space and flexibility to try everything and see what I felt most called to was such a blessing in disguise. that I wish more people like knew of. You know, I wish more people appreciated that we were able to really explore what we wanted to do if you wanted to do so.
Yeah, I will add to that. I'll try to make it short because I actually like a lot of the questions in the chat as well, and I want to get to those. But when it comes to an underrated benefit of being a comm studies major, I think I really saw that when I actually left communication and I worked in corporate recruiting and sales, like I mentioned earlier, in case anyone came in late, because I would work with hiring managers. I would be looking at resumes all the time. I would conduct interviews, and we would be looking at, I was primarily in tech though, but we would look at like engineers, for example, and they would just come from the most amazing schools, have the most amazing resume, code really well in the interview, but what are they missing? They cannot for the life of them communicate what they're doing to other people outside their department who don't understand how to code. And I remember so many of the managers and directors I worked with turning away candidates because they couldn't communicate. And I think people really kind of turn a blind eye towards communication about how important it is. Because they just say, oh, well, you talk for a living. And it's like, yes, we all love to talk in this room, but there's so much more to that. There's so much more to learning how to communicate, how to be an effective communicator, how to be an empathetic communicator, and how to sell yourself, which I want to talk about later for the internship question that we learn in communication that other people just don't know how to do. And that's, I think, one of the most underrated benefits, because unlike anyone else in other majors, we now know how to sell ourselves regardless of whatever field we go into, because we have been taught every single tool possible and every foundation possible about how to create a future for ourselves.
Thank you. That was awesome. Honestly, like this really kind of, I think I'm probably not just speaking for myself, but it kind of is a nice reminder when you hear other people talk about kind of the benefits of this major, because it's just a really nice like way to revisit the why of it all. And yeah, so thank you so much to all of our panelists. All of your answers were so thoughtful, and I think you all offered a really unique perspective on why getting an AAT in comm is a interesting, lucrative, cool path that you could potentially take. So we're going to move on to the Q&A section. So we're already getting some really great questions. So I'll ask a question. Not every panelist has to answer if you don't feel like you need to respond to it, but feel free if you feel like your expertise lends itself to this question. And if you are a participant, on the bottom of your screen, you'll see a little Q&A button with two little speech bubbles, and that's where people are asking their questions. So we will start with our first question. AJ says, hello, I just wanted to ask, in an alternate universe, what would you have majored in if not a comm AAT?
I'll go ahead and start. As I mentioned earlier, I was also, well, I got my AAT in psychology as well. So maybe I would have stuck with that, or like I did, but anyway, I think that if I were to add even another one, I probably would have done like poli-sci, just because it is very related to like the field that I want to go into, which is public policy. But at the end of the day, I just feel like the skills that I learned from communication, they apply so well, and it's like so broad, as everybody has mentioned throughout this panel, that I don't think I would have chosen it as a whole. But that being said, something that I learned that I found like really important was like, no matter what major you do, it doesn't define your career. And I think our like panelists have kind of exemplified that. I'm still in school right now, but like we'll see what happens after. But like regardless, you'll like, obviously most of you that are in this building, I mean in this little panel, are comm majors as well. That's why you're probably here. But yeah, like just do whatever you want, do what makes you happy.
Nice. Anyone else? What would you have majored in if not a comm AAT?
I can answer that. I probably would have majored in journalism. I've kind of hinted at that before a little bit, and it was something that I dabbled in for a while, just because I was really curious about the idea of using my voice for reporting, whether it was investigative journalism or entertainment reporting. And so that's probably what I would have done. But I am really fortunate that to this day, I still do reporting on the side. And so it's kind of, it just that bug a little bit for me. And it's really fun to just do all those things because I don't know what it is about like being able to like, for example, I interviewed the cast for Shang-Chi, the Marvel movie. And I was like, oh my God, how am I doing this? Like, what's going on? But it was just so much fun. I really like how I could do that on the side. But first and foremost, of course, so happy that I did a comm AAT and that I'm in the profession that I am. But it's what's wonderful about comm is that it gives you the tools to do other things on the side and to have other hobbies and, you know, interests as well, because you have that skill set.
Nice, great. And we can always revisit these questions as well if anyone wants to answer them later if we have time. An anonymous attendee gave a little shout out to Jacqueline. Jacqueline walked so we could run. So sweet. We definitely have students in here who appreciate Jacqueline because she's come and mentored some of our forensic students. So always appreciate that little shout out. All right. And then our next question from an anonymous attendee is, I don't know if this exists, but what is it like being an introvert as a public speaker? Does anyone identify as an introvert? If not, I could definitely speak on this.
I would love to talk about this one if that's
Yeah,
okay.
go for it.
I'm an ambivert, so I'm an extroverted introvert. So people think I'm extremely extroverted by the way that I carry myself, but if I could choose on how to recharge myself, I will be alone in a dark room watching Netflix, talking to absolutely no one. So when I first got into public speaking, I was terrified, to say the least. And I did not think that I could carry myself in that way because I grew up with a stutter. So public speaking in general was just terrifying for me. But I think one of the things is, not to get too deep, but as you know, as an Asian American woman, there is this stereotype, this idea that I'm not supposed to have a voice, that I'm supposed to be submissive and silent. And that really, you know, put in my head that I should be more introverted, that I shouldn't speak up and use my voice. And so public speaking was something that helped me realize, no, I do have a voice. It doesn't matter how introverted I feel. I can challenge myself and put myself out there because people want us to be introverted. People want us to not speak up. And that's the thing that's so amazing about public speaking, is that it teaches you all the tools to advocate for yourself. And so when you're an introvert as a public speaker, I think it's really realizing, what do you want to accomplish in that moment? You have a voice, right? It's just hidden deep inside, really scared, right? And you want to ask that voice, like, if I were to speak up right now, and if I can influence, if I can help even one person in the room, that is going to be more beneficial than any mistake, any embarrassing moment I might have, right? And I remember that was a huge thing for me in forensics, where I was like, okay, I don't want to speak. I'm terrified. Why am I joining this team? But I realized that there were so many things that I wanted to challenge and accomplish in my life, where I needed to get myself out of that comfort zone, and realizing that it's not as scary as you might think. But as I teach my students, fear is number one public fear. I don't want to invalidate that feeling whatsoever. Or public speaking is number one fear. But at the same time, faking that confidence, fake it till you make it. I don't know what it is, but I swear it works, because at a certain point, you're faking it to the point where you realize, I'm actually doing it. It's not fake anymore. And that was a huge growing path for me personally. And so I just want everyone in this room to know that, like, people will try to silence you. And regardless if you're introverted or extroverted, realize that you have a voice in you. So.
Yeah, that's a great answer. And I think also, I mean, for myself, I am more of an introverted person, and doing speech and debate when I competed at Cal State Long Beach was definitely a step out of my comfort zone. But I think the thing to remember, and communication in general, but the thing to remember is that we always imagine what the worst case scenario is, right? Where it's like, they're going to throw me up in front of a class, I'm going to have to talk on the spot, and I'm so like uncomfortable with this. But in reality, it doesn't really work like that, right? Where it's always kind of a series of baby steps that get you to if your comfort level is up here or up here, the baby steps will happen to get you to up here, right? And that's kind of like the beautiful thing about it, is that especially in forensics, it's a really supportive community where regardless of like what your personality is like, it's kind of, or whether you're introverted or extroverted, it gives you a space to speak on things that you might not just speak about in an everyday setting. And I've personally have seen some of the most like successful competitive students have been the most introverted interpersonally, because they're just hard workers, or they like really challenge themselves to get there, or that is the one space where they can feel comfortable using their voice. So definitely a space that can be like productive and enjoyable, even if you are more introverted. Anyone else want to answer this question before I move on? All right, great. Our next question from an anonymous attendee is tips on how to get an internship if you don't have a strong network.
I can answer that first.
Yeah, go for that.
First of all, I think networking is something that I didn't hear anything about networking, honestly, when I was in community college. And I wish that was something I was told to do and advised to do sooner. So I get how it might feel intimidating or scary when it comes to like needing to have a network, trying to network to get an internship. I think at its core, right, I know Jacqueline has probably a better answer for this one, but at its core, right, like even when it comes to landing an at its core, even if you don't have a strong network, I think if you're trying to land an internship, you still have to put yourself out there. And so there's a lot of different resources that's out there. You can always look up your alumni services and reach out to the alumni of your school, see what they're doing, and ask them to help try to get you connected. At UCLA, that's what I did. We had an alumni system where you could connect and email alumni depending on what their career paths are. You could ask your professors for internships. That's definitely something that I didn't know when I was a student, but a lot of people that I knew at UCLA went into their professors' hours and asked if they knew anything. And that's also a way to get one. So even if you don't have like strong networking skills, which I definitely do not, there are resources around there from like the internship center, your professors, alumni center, but even like putting yourself out there and asking people who you are friends with. And so I think this question, that's the first part of the question, but I also wanted to address the fact that like, when it comes to networking, it's so important. And I wish I knew this sooner, because when I was in school, I thought that getting spectacular grades would be sufficient. And the answer is that it is not. And when it comes to getting an internship, networking is more key than, where you came from and like what grades you have. After I graduated during the pandemic, it was really, really hard to get a career. And I thought that me going to UCLA and getting a scholarship into UCLA would be sufficient and that all these job offers would come pouring in. But the reality is right now, with all the different careers I have, working at all these different schools, they all came through networking, through Jacqueline helping me land the job, through my professors helping me land the job. So I think this question is really, really important to like pay attention to and really look into, because it's not just about graduating, graduating is really important, but it's like what happens after that. And if you don't have those networks or those internships, it's going to be really hard to land that career, even if you have the degree.
Yeah, that is so important. I'm so glad you spoke on that. And the best advice an entertainment attorney told me once is like, it's about who knows you. Like, and I think sometimes we even get stuck on like, who do I know? Like, it's not even important who you know, it's about who knows you, who's saying your name in those spaces when you're not there, who's saying, oh, like, Serena would be great for this, or Jedi can do this. So that's like the biggest thing. And you need to start cultivating that through, for me, relationship building. Like, that's really all it is. And I know when we hear the term networking, it's like, oh my gosh, what is this? Where do I begin? But you're already doing it now with the relationships you're building with people within your community at Mount SAC. Like, we're talking about one community, right? Which there's so many subgroups even within us. Some of us went to UCLA within the forensics community. Some of us are now teaching communications in the forensics community, but it just starts with just building relationships with people, and your peers are often going to be like your first line of contact. But that's something that I definitely want to also just really highlight and emphasize, because I think that's part of the hidden curriculum sometimes with us as first generation college students or students of color, whatever the identity may be. Oftentimes we don't get that until it's like, wait a minute, how did everybody else get their jobs? And what is this networking thing? And I like to just keep things very simple. It's just about building relationships. And it's not like you being fake, like I'm going to be friends with Jacqueline because she worked in the entertainment industry, but it's more so like, okay, she's really resourceful in this. So, hey, can we schedule like a Zoom? I just want to ask you some questions. And I actually think that was one of the silver linings of the pandemic, where people were just at home. So you could just literally like do a Zoom, catch up with somebody and just talk to them and ask them questions. Now that things are opening up, if you feel more comfortable, like, hey, let's go outside and get some coffee or whatever. But that's really how I would approach it. And I hope it's not as scary when you see it as truly just relationship building and just wanting to learn more. Even for myself, networking is something that, you continue to do once you're even in your career. And, the other women in here can speak to that. Earlier this year, I was working for a judge in Superior Court of DC, and I literally got that externship because of networking. Like, he literally was like, I always hire GW students, blah, blah, blah. And I'm really close with the dean, one of the deans at my school. And that's how I got my externship at Superior Court. And last summer, when I was working for a firm, I got that through another relationship. So you'd be surprised at how valuable relationship building is. And sometimes when you are applying to very competitive stuff, that's how you can further stand out. It's not just your grades or where you went to school at, but it's who knows you. That's so important.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point, Jundi, just because I think you're right. People think of networking as like, oh, I have to go out and meet people. And some people's networks start before they're even born because their families are well connected or what have you. But a lot of it is join the clubs here so that you make the friends that will get you the jobs in the future, or help you in that way. And then you help them. And it's like that mutually beneficial relationship. We do have a couple more questions, so I'm gonna wrap this one up. But Jacqueline, if you want to touch on this question because it's specifically addressed to you. Alicia asks, Jacqueline, how would you recommend entering the field of journalism?
Yeah, I'll actually answer that one in conjunction with the other one. A lot of it really is building your experience, right? And not being scared to build your experience. For example, when I went to Berkeley, when we walk on campus, everyone's flyering and giving out flyers for different clubs. And it was kind of like a joke of like, oh my God, who can avoid these flyers the best? But I was there like, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, taking every single flyer, because you just never know what that flyer, that club might open the door to. And so that actually is what helped me get into the field of journalism, but it's also what helped me network, to build a resume, to build an experience, a connection enough to get an internship. So specifically, I sought out clubs that were going to help me build a repertoire in journalism, right? So I joined entertainment clubs that would help me build a corporate background into getting an internship. I joined a reporting club on campus that helped me build a reel where I was doing reporting videos, I was editing, I was producing, and I was putting together videos. And so those were huge because while doing those projects, while going to networking events, which a lot of colleges have, I was able to meet all the right people because I said yes to that flyer, because I wanted to go join that club and meet those people, because I had ideas, but I needed a platform to build them off of. And so when it comes to entering that field of journalism, building that experience, nowadays, what's really wonderful is with social media, TikTok, Instagram, a lot of people actually have the tools at hand to build those experiences without even having an internship. And so if you want to get into journalism, create TikTok videos, create Instagram videos, create YouTube videos, because if you apply somewhere, you now have a reel to send over. Even if it's a small internship type job, having that reel will show them, okay, this person has talent, maybe not experience yet officially, but we can give them that experience and people will take a chance on you. And that's how you really get your foot in the door. So I think I can definitely answer that more in detail. So feel free to reach out to me separately. But when it comes to internships and experience in general, seek mentorship. A lot of times people are scared to ask for help. And I think that's one of the most beneficial things you can do, because when you seek mentorship, you are not only learning and growing, but you're building a network of people who see that you want to get better. And that is what Jendi was saying, or people will know you. People will know your name because they know that you want to get better and you want to improve and you want to help your community. And I think everyone in this room would love to be mentors to anyone who wants help, right? So feel free to reach. Sorry, I just saw AJ's message in the chat. Yes, of course. But also remember, like, just because you have connections, just because you build connections, don't invalidate the hard work you put in. That's something that I had to learn, where I was like, oh, I'm so lucky that I had that connection, right? Like, I'm so lucky that I knew this person, that I'm so lucky that I was in that room. But I want all of you to reframe that, to realize, no, it's not luck. It was hard work that got you in that room. It was hard work that led you to meet that person. It was hard work to come to this panel today and talk to us, right? You did that yourself to build that connection.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone that answered that, because I know internships are definitely one of those things that they really can help push you forward. And so any advice on how to get them is amazing. Okay, so we're going to answer 2 more questions before we wrap up. So this question is from an anonymous attendee, and they say, I'm transferring to UCLA as a comm major from Mount SAC, and I'm a little bit worried about how theory-based and research-heavy UCLA is. I have always been interested in intercultural and interpersonal communication and was hoping I could be in a hands-on environment where I can practice comm skills like at Mount SAC. Can you share a little bit about how the theory and hands-on aspects affect the outcome of your comm degree?
I mean, I think the other women can speak to that better than me, because I didn't major. I chose not to major in comm, and I know Jacqueline didn't either. But I think understanding is like the first part, and then you can make an informed decision. So earlier I made the comment that I really wasn't down with like how communication was done at UCLA, because I had found out that it is very theoretical, in that it is not like communication studies, like at, for instance, USC, where you have like the broadcast journalism emphasis, the public relations emphasis. At UCLA, I would compare their communications program. It was kind of like a mixture of like anthropology, sociology, and like all of that. And so as far as like the outcome of the degree portion of your question, I think it just depends on like what experience you're looking for. I don't necessarily think that like there is no like change in outcome. Like, it's not like we're talking about like a bachelor's in engineering or a bachelor's in communication, but I think it's just about making an informed decision on like what each communication program entails at a private institution, at a Research One institution, and maybe like at like a liberal arts institution. And for me, I found that I preferred communication studies more so in like the like private or like liberal arts, or more like smaller public. Like, I know the Cal States here in California also do have more like there's a little bit more variety, and that it's not just like theoretical. So I think I would just encourage you to just do your research and find out what each entails. Maybe talk to students who are currently in the program or who have gone through the program. But I can tell you definitively for sure that I wasn't interested in communication studies at UCLA because it was more theoretical. So I would just be mindful of like comm studies at R1 institutions. And for me, if I were to pursue communication studies, I probably would have went to USC, because they had more of the different like, or even like a Cal State, they had more of like, okay, there's like a broadcast journalism emphasis or a PR emphasis. So I don't know if that helps, but my biggest advice is, again, make the most informed decision and do what you want to do, and don't worry about trying to fit into a box, because at the end of the day, like, I don't know if it would change the outcome. At the end of the day, it would say bachelor's in communications, but someone else who's more well versed in that can speak to that.
I could touch on this. I think that yes, like I'm not gonna say like no, communications at UCLA isn't very like theory, but because there are like a lot of aspects that do have like very theory based classes. But the great thing with like UCLA, there's the communications department is really big. So there's a variety of classes that you can take if you want to do like more like interpersonal class or something like that. For example, one of the classes that I took was child development, which I'm really interested in, right? Like I think it's amazing, again, because that little psych background that I have. I think it's really cool how like people begin to talk and stuff. And that's one of the classes that I took through COM that I wouldn't have taken, like, I don't think at any other institution. Additionally, because of how big our school is, so we have over 1,200 organizations, and you can really do like as many as you'd like, or if you feel like capable enough to get that hands-on experience, whether this be like through leadership things. So for example, I'm currently in TSR, which is the Transfer Student Representative Office, where I'm the lobbying director. And I feel like I get a lot of those like hands-on or like vocal skills that I got through like forensics or at Mount SAC, and I'm able to apply them here through like lobbying. And I literally like talk to Congress members and assembly members, etc. Also, we have like programs like the radio. So like you can join the radio if you wanted, like if you're interested in like broadcasting and stuff, or even we have the Daily Bruin. Our school is the only school that runs what's it called, the newspaper 5 times a week. So it's really amazing. And you can like it really, anything that you're kind of thinking, if like you're thinking of a more hands-on approach to comm or like in like journalism, etc., you can find it here. So that's something that I would encourage to come, and you're already coming, I'm assuming, but yeah, so don't be scared.
I just want to quickly jump in. First of all, congratulations on, getting into comms at UCLA, because it is really hard. I think the average is like 3.9 plus GPA, and you're entering in the #1 public school. So, kudos to you for getting into that. But I think it's really incredible how you also already know what you like in terms of studying. And I don't want you to be intimidated, because a lot of people will, UCLA is a research institution, but there are hands-on courses. On top of my head, like I took classes with Professor Miller, Professor Groling, and those classes were more hands-on. UCLA is also really great in that way, where we have a lot of tracks. So you can take classes in mass comm, there's interpersonal comm, and you can filter all your classes in that one track. There's comm and tech, political comm. And so because the major is so broad, you can specialize in interpersonal. And I'm sure those classes would have theory, but also would have hands-on. So even if a school is more research heavy and like theory based, like UCLA, you just have to really do your research on like Rate My Professors, Bruin Walk, to find those professors that are a good fit for you. Similar to Mount SAC, like there are teachers who like to lecture more, and there are teachers who like to have more hands-on activities. At UCLA, you will find a lot of professors who are more focused on theory, but you will also find those unicorn professors that Jendi was talking about, who are amazing teachers and want to have a classroom environment that is focused on growing and learning. And so don't be intimidated. It is true that there's going to be more theory and research happening, but there are still a lot of those professors, those unicorn professors who are out there who have those hands-on aspects. You just have to do your research to figure out who they are. And that comes with like researching online via Bruin Walk and Rate My Professors, but also researching via talking to your peers, right? Talking to alumni who have taken these classes.
I'll just quickly add, because I agree with Lizette and Serena, that the benefit of being at UCLA, if you are interested in like in a particular area of work, is like being in proximity to like Hollywood. So maybe that could be like the trade-off, right? That is a benefit. Like we do have a lot of people in the entertainment industry who come to our school and that network. So you're not limited to your educational, like in the actual physical classroom, as Lizette said. And then as Serena pointed out, like you can find ways to like take more broader courses, but I would also just think about that too. If you want to work in the entertainment industry, it could be worth it being at UCLA.
Yeah, wow, that was like all really excellent advice. So if anyone is planning on transferring to UCLA, I think you have all the resources now. Okay, so we have one last question, and then if you are here for extra credit, hang back after the Q&A so that you can put your name in. We're going to open up the chat, and you can put your name and professor, and we can get that recorded. And if the panelists are interested, they can put their contact info. But this last question is addressed to Jendi, and Maya asks, do you feel that being a communication major guided you into the area of field of law that you've selected?
Yes and no. I kind of knew I was interested in like getting into trial work, as far as like particular practice areas. I was very much open, but I'm still interested in like criminal work or entertainment, very different sports. But in my externship this fall, when I was working for my judge, he had a criminal docket. So on my first week, actually first day on the job, I was thrown in on a triple homicide case to research, and it was just like, oh, okay, we're doing this. But I had an opportunity to just see attorneys in trial, on both sides, like, on the public defenders litigate, as well as like, the US attorney. And it was just good for me to see that, to see how attorneys conduct themselves in court. And I found that I really enjoyed the researching and the writing aspect for my judge. Like, he gave me one assignment to see if like that particular defendant who was serving prison for a triple homicide could get released earlier. And there's a lot of stuff happening with current statutes, with COVID, some boring law stuff. I won't get into that, but I do enjoy the research part. So I mean, I guess generally being a comm major, like, I love that part of like the writing and the research. And that's like, I think where I thrive as well in the legal industry. In addition to like the oral piece as well, and the public speaking and the advocacy. And I actually just met with my judge. We had to catch up today over Zoom, and he was just like, you brought so much like light, and you always had a great personality, and he's a sweetheart as well. And for me, I just wanted to see what criminal law was like. And, they definitely threw me in, like I said, triple homicide, my first day on the job. But I think it just, being a comm major really just informed my ability to just, do what is most important in the legal profession, which is to be an effective communicator, researcher, and a writer. So, I mean, that just continues to grow. I'm always growing my writing skills.
Yeah, that's great. Like, so interesting, and like, what a crazy case to get thrown into. Like, here you go, just day one. Start with, you did forensics, right? You'll be fine.
DC is like weird. It's not a state. So I was like, oh my gosh, like what is happening?
All right. Thank you everyone so much. All our panelists, thank you so much. You all did an amazing job. Thank you for sharing all of your experiences. I'm sure this is going to be so valuable for everyone who attended, and for people in the future who get to see this recording as well. And just for everyone to know, the chat is open so that you can put your name and your professor's name if you need, or if you're here for extra credit. And panelists, if you're comfortable putting your contact info in the chat, so people can reach out to you, that is an option. And obviously no obligation to do that. I'll put mine in the chat as well, in case anyone needs to get in contact with me. We'll probably leave the chat open for about 5 minutes for people to put their names and professors. And other than that, thank you so much to everyone.
It was a pleasure. Bye, everyone. I have to jump off, but this was amazing. It was great to see you.
Bye. Thank you, Jendi.
Of course. Good seeing you, Jacqueline. Congrats again on your new role.
Thank you so much. Good seeing all of you. Bye, everyone. Thank you for putting this on, Alex and Jedi.
Bye. Thanks, Jacqueline.
Here.